Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the gift of your precious time. And yes, you do have a better version of me this week compared to last week. Carl, I hope you feel better soon because it's lousy being under the weather. I want to just start by acknowledging the very dark sides of AI. So I'm excited to share some things today, but images like this or this one, while in these dark times, we can get some relief. If something like that is made with a powerful image generation software, and I don't know if it's Photoshop or image generation or a combination of both, but if it is, what we're looking at is about the equivalent of fully charging your smartphone. And when you think about the scale of that, we're looking at data centers that are consuming the electricity of 100,000 households, or in this recent report that I'm quoting from, the centers being constructed right now, the scale of them, we're looking at the power of about 2 million households. So it's not surprising that we've then got stats like this, where in the US, we may be facing more demand electricity-wise for data processing than all of the energy-intensive goods like steel, aluminium, cement, and so forth. And that is incredibly scary prospect and incredibly sobering. And what does that mean for an educator like me who's trying to get some sense of how we might use AI tools? I think what we're asking ourselves is, whatever we're doing, is it worthy of this cost? Is it bot worthy for everyone's time and energy, and particularly the resources for our precious planet? And I'm not going to share something today where I think, hey, I've got this cool little thing to show you, and I think it's bot worthy for sure. I'm not in that space. I'm in the space of just trying to consider the types of things we might be able to design, exploring that functionality to then be in a better position to make a call about whether something is bot worthy. But I think this is an underlying question we have to ask ourselves. I'm going to share a quote now from, all of these people who are engaged and busy writing blogs and so forth. And this one caught my attention from New York Times. It's a commentary on where we're at in this race to achieve general artificial intelligence, where a machine is supposedly, hypothetically, going to be the equivalent of a human mind plus more. And her commentary is really about what she calls mid-tech, kind of where we are at this point, and the need for expertise. And I'll just share a little snippet from this post. So here she is obviously looking at the medical context, but her point of AI's most revolutionary potential at this point in time is helping experts apply expertise better and faster. But for that to work, there has to be experts. And, this does bring some comfort and some questions of, well, who can contribute to this field? Can someone like me working in a higher education space without a background in computer science, for us as an LCT community or other research communities, what can we bring to this kind of space? And while the race towards generative artificial intelligence, general artificial intelligence is very real. I read something tonight, the Nobel Prize winner from last year saying he thinks we're going to achieve it in 5 to 10 years. While that prospect perhaps brings enormous discomfort, I think as educators, we are still in a space where our voices need to be heard, and we have to think about the knowledge and the expertise that we as a community can bring to bear as we think about the potential of what we could design and what we can try to explore designing. And so really today is about joining this conversation with me, thinking about our own knowledge base and our expertise. What is it that our theoretical frameworks can offer? And what can we contribute to all of these conversations that are happening? I'm going to start today by explaining the gist of what I mean by an AI agent. I will focus on this new work that I'm doing. I'm going to share some of the context. I'm going to try to do a live demo of the AI agent, and we can see how that goes. And then if there is time, I will cast back to some of the work that has led up to this point in time, but I'll make sure we have time for the new. So we know that we're in this space of an explosion of large language models. It seems like every week or two, there's a new one being released. And part of the reason for their prominence in our education sector is to do with the sheer capacity, not just of the training data, which we know is measured in petabytes and is absolutely enormous. And when you think that 1 GB is, I think it's about 178 million words is 1 GB. Think of something that's measured in petabytes. So that is mind-blowing. But part of the reason why I think we're seeing so much prominence is to do with what we can put into a user prompt. Our prompts are broken down into something called a token. It's like a unit. It's about 4 characters. And as of about April 2023, many of these large language models could use 128,000 tokens, around about 100,000 words. So you're looking at that as being in the user prompt and as the prompts unfold and the conversation. So enormous capacity. But the other feature of the large language models is not just the training data and the amount that we can input, if you like, is to do with the fact that they can, if you think about the training data, that any model could very quickly become out of date, and that the designers of these large language models want to be able to control them for particular purposes in some cases, and they want to better control and update resources and source material. And there's a process which I just understand the gist of called retrieval augmented generation, or RAG. And this is enabling the large language model not just to firstly respond to the user prompt, but to first, in its programming, it's got the instructions to go and check the resources, whatever they are told to look at. And that's quite significant in the sense that if you're a consumer of these large language models, we have no control. That's part of the frustration. We have no control, not only of the training data, but the resources that the large language model is going to retrieve. We've got no control of that. What happens is, based on whatever is in our prompt and how it's broken down into tokens, is that the resources are hierarchically organized into snippets, getting some kind of match with our prompt, fed back into the large language model. So the resources and the prompt are generating the completion or the response. And when I'm trying to make sense of what the response is, what I'm continually needing to remind myself of is we've got a statistical arrangement of words, and in some cases, not even words. We have arranged wording based on a model that can handle data in a series and can predict the next word based on the word that's there and the presence of other words. Like if we have the word happy, prediction would be, depending on the context, happy birthday. Or if you have wine, depending on the context, you have words that could be substituted for one another, like beer or wine or tea or coffee. Or if it's my Friday night and the data is modeled on that, you're going to have chips and cider. I don't know about your Friday night. But you basically have models that are not designed to be meaning makers in the way that we might feel that they are, that sort of dialogic feel. We have to remind ourselves that the completion is arranged wording. statistically arranged wording based on prediction. So whatever large language model we're using, ChatGPT, my institution's using Copilot, Gemini, Claude, a whole bunch of them. Today, I'm not talking about being involved in training of that magnitude and level. When I talk about an AI agent, I'm talking about a little layer of instructions that basically sits on top. And this is called a system message or a prompt. So it's working with the underlying large language model, and we are trying to steer the output in some way. So we're creating instructions to try and steer the response. So we can't control the access of the retrieval system. We can't control the training that's happened, but we're trying to add in a layer so we can get it to do something that we think might be useful and meaningful. So I'm going to show you just a little glimpse of that, and then we'll be able to see, I'll give you a bit of context for it, and then we'll be able to see it live. The interface I'm going to show you is from the University of Sydney Cogniti project. Our institution is one of many that's involved in a pilot. And what you get as an agent builder is an interface like this. This is just a screenshot, and you can write a message. And this is just the start of a message. You are a reflective writing assistant. Your role is to identify different levels of context dependency that are present or missing in the user's writing. For levels that are missing, use something. Do this, don't do that. You're telling it its role and the primary function that you want it to perform. And you can say, give it information about the users. Your users need to write reflections with both stronger and weaker context dependence. Your users are experienced, registered nurses who are writing reflections as part of their professional development portfolio. So you can give information about the role and purpose, and you can see there's no programming language. I speak no Python, Python don't speak to me. I can just write this in plain English. There's a little bit of formatting. You can do the asterisks there mean bold, and you can actually do capitals or bold. You can do dot points. You have a few little things where you're saying, notice this word more, or keep noticing these groups of words. So you have something like this. The whole system message, we've been advised to try to keep them under 1,000 words. So you just open a Word document and you can write it. And it has different parts that you can include. One of the big parts is a set of rules. And here's a couple in the agent that you will see. Identify if levels are present or missing. If levels are present, show exact wording from the user. If levels are missing, use question prompts. And you can go in and test this, you can tweak it, it's very changeable. So you write the system message, you can see how it works, and you can go back and forth. So you've got some rules. And one of the features that's really important is that you can also add sources that you want it to look at. It's quite hard to know the hierarchy of all the source material. So this is a Canvas page here in the source related to a tutorial that was given. It's hard to know how that behind the scenes hierarchy works in relation to the retrieval system and the training data, but you can add in this layer of sources. And I found that so far it's useful for telling students where they can get information about something or reminding them of a marking rubric. So you can actually use this to put in links that will be part of the feedback. And hopefully you'll see that shortly. So the system message, all you need to know is any one of us could write it without the knowledge of a special programming language. We have to think about the purpose. We have to give information about the user, number of rules, and different parts like sources. And I'll show you a little bit more of this later on. What a student sees, though, is just a chatbot interface. So we've got the kind of chatbots that we're familiar with But here we can control it by embedding it in a Canvas page, and we can have a welcome message to start. And so that is something that the one I'm about to show you, we haven't used with students yet. So this is very much hot off the press. I was tweaking the system message this afternoon, trying to see if I could get it to do a few different things. But that's what a student will see. And I'll just give you a little bit of context before we look at the agent and see how it goes. So we're looking, I've got this new collaboration. It's only been going a couple of weeks. It's for a postgrad diploma, and it's related to advanced nursing practice. The students are already working as nurses. Many of them are studying and working at the same time. They are doing this kind of postgrad diploma, possibly to get into a master's program, but also many of them seem to do it because they're needing to get documentation towards a promotion like becoming a nurse specialist. And one of the big things they have to do is a PD portfolio. And it's massive. And I'm just going to give you a little sense of what they have to do. This is a bit of a template. And they have a number of pillars, they call them. There's about 4 pillars for this particular assignment. And what students have to do is use this template. They have to come up with various vision statements like this one. Building knowledge and skills in accordance with competencies. In this case, helping less experienced staff. Time frame. They could have a number of goals. They could have parts to the goal, like this one. This student wants to focus on role modeling and feedback. They also relate the goals to some kind of personal attribute. And I've just got the blue here to highlight that a student obviously can't cover all of this in 800 words. Part of the teaching is helping them to make a selection. Then they have to say various strategies. And that's things like this student saying, okay, I'm going to work as a preceptor. One important part of this concept of preceptorship that I'm learning about is that a more junior nurse will have some overlap with a more senior nurse, a bit of shadowing and a bit of observation, being able to ask things in real time. And if that was a strategy that a student was implementing, they would need to have to say whether they've achieved it or not, and they need a bunch of evidence. And this is where it gets a bit messy. So you have, as a student, what you've got to do is you've got everything you say you're doing, all the claims you make, all the plans that you're putting into action. You've got to have a bunch of appendices where you have documented evidence. And a couple of those are written, and that's what we're focusing on today. And what this creates is for a marker. So imagine you've got 35 students. They're filling in these templates. They're extensive. They've got like 4 pillars, multiple pages. Then they might have all of these appendices. So one portfolio might have 15 or 20 appendices that a marker has to open. And they have to then be able to look at that and relate it to the plan and make a call that the evidence matches the development plans. Now, what I've been hearing from this lecturer that I'm working with is that the records, this evidence, it's really mundane. A certificate, an email. What she wants, in her words, is it needs to be more advanced. It needs to be this postgraduate level. And one thing that we have done this year as we've started to collaborate is and say, okay, if you don't like the evidence you're getting, well, what do you want? And this year, what she's going to specify is that she wants a couple of extended pieces, 2 to 4, about 800 words, and it all supposedly needs to be robust. So that's a bit of the context of the critical reflections for this particular cohort. So for me coming in, my genuine question is, well, what does advanced even mean? I've done some work with the critical reflection book, second year B.Ed students, or looking at ancient history and different kinds of writing you have to do there. All of that we know in the work with LCT, we could make a guess, something to do with experience, something to do with theory, experience, theory, some kind of connection. But what is it that is advanced for this particular cohort? So I'm not going to share the whole full behind the scenes of what we did to try to tackle this, but to give you a sense that we did look at a couple of these PD portfolios, looked at the template itself, and I'll bring that up again shortly, created exemplars, tried to make visible in wording what this critical reflection is meant to look like, and also creating models, so not using generic ones like Gibbs, but we've created some particular for the PD. So
Lucy,
what, yeah,
sorry, can I just ask, just for clarity,
sure.
are, this bot interface
Yeah.
that you've set up, is the idea that the students put in their draft work
Yes.
or that they ask the bot questions?
Yeah, I'll show you. We'll do it live.
Oh, okay. Oh, great.
Yeah,
Okay.
we'll put in a draft. Mm. So
Thanks.
yeah, thank you for your question. So just going in at one angle around advanced, obviously we could look at it in so many different ways, but looking at, okay, what would advanced mean if we're going from the perspective of controlling the relative strength of context dependence? So we're looking at the dimension of LCT semantics and then semantic gravity. And I'm going to share kind of why that was an endpoint, but to give you a sense of what I've started to find as I've done this analysis. And the analysis that I'm about to show you is using this framework of having to create a translation device. And what I love about the process of creating translation devices with LCT is you taking a concept like context dependency, and you're trying to make sense of relative strengths in a particular data set. And you're in the process of doing that, you're creating clear criteria for what you think is stronger or weaker within that data set. And as you're doing that, you tease out examples that provide a really good point of reference as you do your analysis. And this process, you can see that for me, the way in for choosing context dependency was kind of visible in the templates, was immediately kind of an angle to explore. Let's see what's here. You've got a vision statement. You've got evidence with some kind of concrete particulars. You've got goals. You've got personal attributes. I could sort of see there was probably going to be some kind of semantic range of relative strengths that's kind of already structured into the template. So that's why I've started here. And I'll just show you the relative strengths as I understand them at this point in time. And then after I've done that, I'm going to show you how I've used them in designing the agent, and we'll get to see it live. So for this particular data set, how can I make sense of the relative strengths of context dependence? Unsurprisingly, the specific concrete particulars, thoughts, actions, feelings. Yesterday, my preceptee asked me about why tramadol was chosen for a patient after a hip replacement and inquired about the observed side effects. She queried why ibuprofen was not prescribed instead. And in the data, what I can also see is a little shift away from that one moment in time to, well, actually, there's a massive shift to the vision statement. That's where there's nothing that is really tied to a particular context. Knowledge, skills, okay, you don't really know much there. Competencies, all very general and not tied to a setting. And then what's really interesting is what happens in between. And this is what I can see. You can get recurrent actions and thoughts and feelings. So not one moment in time, but something that might repeat. I always encourage them. to ask about why a particular medication was charted. And then there's another shift that I can see that is further away from a particular setting and time. It seems to be something about generalized behavior or interpreting it, something like this. I think this shared reason aloud practice provides the opportunity for us to both verbalize our choices. So what the students are having to do here is they've given us concrete particulars and they need to say something about them. And it seems to involve some kind of classification or categorization of the detail that they have introduced. So a reason aloud practice. So I would argue with what I can see in the data set that is then further decreasing context dependence. And then you have really interesting things that are kind of floating and even more or less bound to a setting, like personal attributes. One of my strengths is empathy. Okay, not talking about an example, a moment in time, or a growth area within a goal. I'll focus on role modeling and feedback, just generally, not specified, not tied to a particular setting, time, or place. And then you have the PD goal itself, which is often quite close to the vision statement, like this. PD goal of shared knowledge, but you get the means as well. So through preceptorship. So there's something that is further specifying how that vision is going to be enacted in some way. So far, strongly looking at the template they had to do, working with the small pool of examples that I had, thinking, okay, so this is what I think is going on with context dependency. So then how can we kind of make these expectations clearer, and how can we make the marker's job easier?
Sorry, Lucy,
Mm,
before we move on, so
thank you.
can we just go back to the
Sure.
translation device?
Yeah, please do.
Um, so you know, you've put some very specific kind of content from that
Mm.
the pillars there. Um, and I'm just trying to think about the vision statement. So that could be one example of the weakest semantic gravity. If they use concepts from the courses, could that be another?
Yeah,
Or are you looking specifically at, you know, kind of,
Mm.
I'm just kind of thinking here about focus and basis again. You know, when they do this,
Yeah,
it goes there, but whether that's an example of a kind of a weaker, like, I'm not expressing myself well clearly. If it's one example of where that weaker semantic gravity could manifest, but there might be others, like
Mm.
if they draw on theoretical knowledge or principles of nursing, like empathy in there,
Yeah,
dealing with the patient or something like that.
yeah,
Would those be other examples where that level of
yeah.
semantic gravity would be attained?
Yeah, I'm not sure yet because my primary focus as a starting point has been what on earth do they have to connect and juggle within 800 words from this massive
Mm,
template. I think what I would guess is that there's actually a side step. So you might have something around me role modeling feedback. And then there'd be a step to literature to see how it might manifest in literature. And depending on the treatment there, I'm not sure whether that would be stronger or weaker in context
mm,
dependency, depending on whether that was pegged to particular examples or not.
mm. Okay, thank you.
No, thank you for asking. Yep. So I think the point here is just to say, using the theoretical architecture of LCT in the process of doing this translation device, there's some rigor in progress where you're trying to create a point of reference for the analysis. But for me, and this is what I'm working my way up to sharing, is a point of reference for the system message design. And that's what I'm going to show you. So what we did from the teaching part, I'm not going to delve into that for this talk today. But in a session of about 40 minutes with these students, that's it. What we did is gradually introduce them to this idea of context dependency within that time, and didn't say, hey, here's an LCT translation device, simply called them levels that they need to include and connect. So students saw detail like this, that there was different levels that they had to include and connect. And it's this kind of thinking about, well, what are these levels, that informs directly what is typed into the system message. So again, I'm not going to attempt to show you all of it, but just a couple more details before the live demo. So telling the chatbot to use the levels just for the user's wording and use prompt questions, and you'll see some of those in action. And then the key part here, and this is where the thinking for the translation device at a point in time or as it evolves, as the data pool may change, is that you need to give definitions of what on earth you mean. So this, the training data for the GPT or the large language model underlying this chatbot, it may or may not have accessed web pages to do with semantics or articles, open access articles. It may or may not. You can't assume any of that. You have to put in, you have to define everything that you mean. So if I'm saying for this particular, very particular type of critical reflection, that there's 6 levels the students need to connect, then I need to give definitions of all of them. So here's one for level 3. The descriptions are classified or categorized as types of behavior that could be repeated or not. So the writer's saying something about the concrete details that were introduced in lower levels.
That's really useful. Thank you.
Yeah, so the test is, if you, whatever definition you have, you then see how the chatbot interprets it. And if it's not finding what you want, then you sort of have to point it back to yourself. Okay, what's in my system message? What do I really mean by level 3? I'm showing you level 3 because for me, that's one of the ones that's probably a bit wobbly at this point in time. I think there's something there. I'm trying to define what it is. I need to see if it's recurrent in the data pool. But the chatbot will have no idea unless I'm able to, in a fairly simple terms, define what I want it to find and be able to comment on.
Can I just ask, have you done this with humans rather than bots? Because presumably you want the humans to be able to do this, not just the bot, and you're using the bot as a way to tell the humans. Have you tried giving different definitions to humans themselves and seeing if that helps them and getting some feedback from them about what then might go into the description for the bot?
Yeah, thank you, Paul. I think something like that would be very useful for testing how they interpret what you've actually put in as a kind of definition or something that you're trying to build criteria for. In this case, no, you're seeing this. I mean, I've been tweaking this agent this afternoon. It hasn't gone live yet with students, but I would say, and I have a slide to sort of show you the gist of this at the end, is all of this is happening in a teaching and learning sequence. So what students will experience when they try this is after we've built some knowledge together. So we call that a step in a literacy model, we call that guided practice. So the AI agent is coming in after shared knowledge has been established with students. And then, as Lee was asking, it becomes feedback about drafts that they submit. And I think we just need to see it in action. So what I'll do is, I've got it open. I'm going to just unshare here, and we'll see, fingers crossed, we'll see if we can get this going in real time. And yeah, if anybody has anything they would like to comment on at this point, feel free while I just switch what you see.
Lucy, something that's of interest to me. Do the students have access to these levels, or is it something that you've just programmed the bot to do?
As
Or
in, what do you mean by access to the levels?
um, how you've defined those levels of semantic gravity differently. Is that done? Is that shown explicitly to the students or
Yes.
just implicitly within those headings for their pillars?
Very, very, very explicit. Yeah. So we introduced them. So we've had one teaching session and we've just introduced them gradually with very small, like 3 or 4 sentences, getting them to see relative shifts in strength, being able to identify type, just as a first round of thinking about it. So yes, so that is part, and it's great timing. That's part of the shared knowledge, because actually this chatbot that we're about to see, it won't make sense unless they've attended the workshop or seen the video of the workshop. So yeah, I'm bringing that up now. Just going to refresh the page, make sure that it's there. Okay, so I'm going to put in draft 1. It comes up quite quickly, so just take your breath and then I can show you more slowly. We can scroll through. So
Okay, Lucy, we can't see your screen at the moment. Is that right?
Yep, that's right. I'm going to share this now.
Okay, good.
Is that better?
Yes, we can see it.
Yeah. So this is the embedding of the Cogniti agent into a Canvas page. It's on a big page template that we need to do to explain that it's part of a pilot program. And so there's a whole bunch of things before that, but this is the space where students will put in a draft, and I will do that. So I'm going to put in a draft that I know has some things that are missing, and we'll see if it can pick it up. So I'll tell you in advance what, by my analysis, this draft is missing. This is what we've seen, that students are not good at integrating personal attributes. They put them in a template and then they forget about them. And being able to make some generalization about behavior is also one of the things that's really absent. So this draft reflects that. And I'm going to just copy and paste this in. So I've put in a prompt, is this good? Or is this better? Is this okay? You could also ask, please check my levels. So the whole knowledge that you bring to bear in the prompt itself is obviously a massive consideration, but I'm going to go with the fairly basic comment. Is this good? Is this okay? Give me, how can I make this better? That type of thing. You put in the draft. Okay, I'll just let that run. Okay, so I'll just slow this down. It's got an opening thing. Thank you for submitting. And it explains that it's only really designed to check these 6 levels. So it's not a megabot. It's just got a particular purpose. And then it says what's present. You provided specific examples, and it includes wording that corresponds to those. So it's saying it's got level 1, level 5, and level 6. It's saying it's missing level 2, recurrent actions and feelings. It's missing 3 and 4 and 4B. And that corresponds to what I would do as a kind of manual marker, or someone wanting to give feedback. And then in this case, what I've done with the bot so far is to say, okay, it's missing. And then you've got these kind of prompt questions. Is it one-off? Is it recurrent? And this is where the literature comes in. Is there any literature that can help you make an accurate generalization, or literature that says something about the personal attribute? And that's kind of the design. And then the idea is that students could come back to it and draft. And that's one of the questions, will they even draft? And for this particular cohort, I don't know that. But I'll put in potential second draft. And what I'm hoping is that it's meant to just pick up the changes, not do the whole analysis again, because that could be pretty tedious. So a second draft is in simply with the question better. Okay, and it's picking up the changes. Okay, previously missing, now present, and then it's identifying the wording where it thinks that level is present. Yeah. And then it's got a little bit here about remaining levels. Yeah, it's saying that they've got all the levels, and that is the very basic functionality of this particular chatbot at this point in time. You could develop a lot of others, but trying to get it to identify something and not give random feedback, but give more precise prompts about what is important. And that gives you a little bit of a sense of how that works so far.
Can I ask a quick question, Lucy?
Yeah, please.
This is really, really interesting, but I was just wondering, the feedback shows students which levels are missing. Did you find in your analysis text and the feedback and so on that a high scoring response requires every level to be evidenced? Because you would think that there are different ways of writing. So you might be kind of moving up and down the semantic scale, jumping levels. So you might go from 3 to 6, and then you might come down to 1 and so on. And that might well be assessed as being a high level reflection without necessarily going through all the levels. But at least as the chatbot dialogue is demonstrating at the moment, there's a risk of it looking a little bit like painting by numbers. So you've got 1, 3, and 6. Where are the other levels? You need to put those in, and then I mean, I know this is early days, but then for the students working through the process and so on, it risks becoming a little bit performative then, where they're going back to their own writing, and rather than thinking about their career and their experiences and how they can pull that to higher levels and evidence that through their experience and so on, instead they're going back and thinking, oh, I'm missing level 4A. What was that again? And then they're going and finding out what that is, and then kind of performatively inserting that so that they've got all 6 levels. So I just wondered where, kind of how you're thinking about those kinds of things at the moment.
Yeah, a couple of things. So one is in the examples that I was given and in the reworking of them with the lecturer, the kind of first round, sort of, I guess it's thinking about a kind of series, a teaching sequence and a series. This first round of awareness of the fact that you actually need to connect these things. At the moment, it doesn't identify each, or it hasn't yet really been designed to identify each shift as it unfolds. So it's identifying across the text whether those levels are present. It's not saying that you have to do it in a certain sequence. So and this is where the other parts of the teaching are kind of not visible for you guys to see, in the sense that there's a whole bunch of other areas of teaching that are happening as well as this. So this chatbot is coming in for a very particular purpose, which is most of the students are stuck on level, for teaching talk on level 1 and 2, and not even bringing those in. Yeah, so I definitely think if we were trying to make this do everything, then it'd be very problematic. The point of designing something like this is that you give it a very particular purpose at a moment in time, and you could design more of them. Yeah. And this is really an exploration to see, could it even pick up what we would consider for this type of data, shifts in relative strength? So is it even, part of what I'm doing is just saying, is it even possible that it would even understand that? And then thinking about, well, can we get away from the whole level speak? Is there another way to do it that might be more, that shows more flexibility? Yeah.
Can I I ask a question? It's Jane here. Can I just kind of take a step back so that I understand? So Cogniti has been created by the University of Sydney as a tool that gives students and maybe others, I don't know, students access to a large language model, but with something added in between. So it sits rather than students natively accessing whatever tool. First of all, is that the question? That's just to make sure I understand.
Yeah. So
what have they
yeah.
what have they added in before you've done the prompt engineering? Do you know what they've done already?
Well, the Cogniti interface, you select which GPT you want, so that's depending on the institution. And they've just created an interface where you can try and design an agent. So it's an agent building interface where someone without programming language could try to think about the type of things that could be possible for writing feedback.
And so it has this suggestion of, but the levels thing, that is something that they've developed rather than you've developed. Where's the levels thing come from?
Yeah, so that is purely from me as the agent builder, responding to the teacher's feedback and the examples that we're seeing, that they're not even aware that the reflection needs to they're not even really aware that the reflection needs to be connected to the PD portfolio.
It says if you've got these two little star things, that's just you've typed that in. That's not actually a keyboard that has been developed by the Cogniti team. That's just your interpretation of how you think the large language model will work.
Oh, no. So the Cogniti team have given us a couple of templates and one quick kind of seminar just to talk about what a system message is, and given us a couple of pointers like having a rule section, like having the opening statement. And a couple of formatting things that you could see with the asterisks and the bold, and how to break up the system message. We've had a little bit of guidance there, but it's really just trial and error and talking to colleagues and seeing what happens. And so what you're seeing,
Another question. So that's prompt engineering that you're doing, and are they giving you advice on generic prompt engineering, or have they built something extra that in a way interprets and then does something? I'm kind of interested in the technical bits to find out where the value is being added. So do you know because what I'm asking is really, if you went and prompt engineered any old device, would it be any model? Would it be any different to Cogniti?
Well, I don't know how Cogniti stacks up to paid versions of GPTs where you have more control of what you're asking it to do. The conversation is remembered. You may have some degree of source control. So yeah, I've just sharing today the experience with Cogniti. I don't know how it weighs up against others.
Cool. Okay, so that's good to know. Right, then the next question is, I think this kind of builds on what Steve was talking about, and also what maybe Paul was alluding to, is the quality of the output that you're getting from the large language models via the Cogniti tool plus your prompt engineering. Has that been reviewed by anyone other than yourself? So we did some work where we got a number of teachers to look at marking by a large language model, and the teachers couldn't agree. So I just wondered how confident you are about the accuracy, the kind of the quality of the output. Is it personal, or is it being validated by more
Yes, part of the I'll just answer that question quickly and looking at the time, and then I'll get back to sort of rounding off the talk. So part of it is it's a the pilot project, you have a history of the conversations that have happened. So I'll be able to see, do students even draft? Do they make sense of the levels? Do they ask questions that are not to do with the levels at all? Are we able to get a better sense of what the needs are? This is an initial anticipation, trying to see, can I get something to do with context dependence? And can I get a consistent response, that will be more accurate, and more reliable than just going to a GPT without this agent level. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, thanks. I'll stop asking.
No problem. So I'll just go back to PowerPoint quickly, in the time. So I think the main thing that I was wanting to share today is not so much the kind of context of the example and these incredibly early steps, but if we are trying to design something where we want to get some writing feedback about a particular feature or part or something that we care about, the process of having to think really hard about what is it that I want the chatbot to identify and how do I get a consistent response. The process of creating the translation devices, to me, whether you warm to this example or not, the process of thinking through that, it's incredibly useful, because these little chatbots have to have a very particular function. The system message is quite short. You cannot create a megabot. You're doing something that fits in a teaching sequence at a moment in time for a particular purpose. So it has to have that purpose. So we can use our theoretical frameworks to think hard. I've done one for abstract parts. I've done one for introducing a claim and dealing with counterclaims, or introducing evidence and being able to elaborate on the evidence. Whatever the focus is, we have to be clear about what it is we want it to do. But the process of creating translation devices, it actually gives us wording that we can put into the system message. And that's the part that I think is exciting. And as we explore that functionality, we have to be incredibly critical of the type of things we're creating. And back to my question of whether it's even bot worthy. And I think probably here's a good place to pause. I will show a couple of references. We have a minute or two, I think, for any final comments or questions.
Lucy?
Yeah.
Hi, thank you. This is super interesting and really, really inspiring. But I'm wondering so you said you've tried this with abstracts, and we've talked about that before with your students. I wonder what the response that you're getting from your students interacting with these bots is. Could you say a little bit about that?
Yeah, really limited at this point in time, because we've got basically a couple of these type of agents that we're building, and you can see the conversation history in two really short talks that I've done in the past, and I'll share the references to those. Students are drafting. I mean, we created these things, had no idea whether students would even draft, but there is something about that 24/7 help. I had students doing things at 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. and actually having ongoing interactions, trying to get feedback to improve drafts. And I honestly didn't even know whether that would happen. So there's some indication of an interest to try, and that's really all I could say accurately at this point in time.
That's cool. Thanks.
Can I just ask something about, I mean, you had it focus on levels
Yeah.
and whether they were there or not. One of the things I've ended up thinking a lot about with my first year students and their writing, and then my own, is it's not just putting the levels there, it's about linking and what it actually means to link levels. So it's very easy. I mean, this get back, I guess, a bit to what Steve was saying about it then being performative, that you can just write a sentence that
Yeah,
puts the level in. And in the
absolutely. So
context
you
I'm
could
thinking of, it's a
design,
lot simpler, the
yeah,
levels, but even then, my first years, okay, they mess the levels out, and that's my first task. And then my second task is, and now do the linkage.
yeah.
Have you got any feedback about whether
No, it's
I
really
was
too early to
capable?
say, because the initial pedagogic problems is there were very few shifts in context dependence. You had this fragmented bit of writing, unhinged to the massive portfolio. But something like that, you then go, okay, let's design an agent that um, helps identify when they are doing the connecting, maybe gives suggestions of how they could point to particular pages with examples that they could look at. So absolutely, and that's the kind of pinpointing of here's something that we can see students need. Can we design something that meets that particular need?
The other thing, does it actually comment? I didn't. It looked like it was just saying whether the levels were there or not. So I didn't have time to see the detail. Was it saying the levels there, but it's a bit weak? I mean, is it able to? Was it asking questions about, oh, you could strengthen it's there, but you could
Yeah.
strengthen it?
Yeah, it was drawing on some of the instructions had prompt questions, which included and so it does so far from what I've seen, it will use the prompt questions about, okay, you've got a personal attribute there. Is there anything in the literature that talks about that attribute in relation to your role? So it will nudge them that way. Yeah, so it will do some presence or absence and a suggestion. But again, it's only based on whatever you've fed it in terms of the prompt questions.
Can I
Yeah.
ask a
Okay.
question?
Thanks.
Yeah.
Would it be possible to put the links into the chat, or are we
Oh,
sharing this?
yep, absolutely.
And so Cogniti at the moment is it free to use for educators, but then we'll go to a paid for service, or
Yeah, the way the Cogniti pilot is working at the moment is I think there's nearly 100 institutions involved all around the world. And then there is a pilot period, and then institutions have to decide whether they're going to use Cogniti or something else. And it's part of institutions working out what on earth their AI policy is. And that's the underlying question. So yes, short answer, it does, you have to pay for it eventually.
oh. And one of the things that we added to, we've got some AI tools that are marking questions, and what we've done is we've added a flag so students can say, is this a rubbish answer or is this a good answer? So they kind of agree, disagree. And then what we've found is that there are patterns where some of the questions are like a bit, all the students are saying this is a load of rubbish that we're getting out. And then what we're doing is we're reviewing what those questions are. And sometimes it's about the marking scheme prompt. Sometimes it's just rubbish questions. So I think it's interesting. Is there anything that's built into Cogniti at the moment for students to effectively give peer feedback about the output from the large language model?
Not that I'm aware of, but I think institutions are doing their own evaluations.
That's, you can do it at scale then, if you see what I mean. It might be something to
Yeah.
suggest kind of a bit of functionality for the Cogniti tool, because students see quite quickly, oh, well, that's a bit rubbish. And then you can actually start to look at, because it is effectively the translation tool is becoming a marking criteria. That's what it seems to be. And what's interesting then is, do teachers agree that this is a good marking criteria? And then the next question is the output from the large language model actually congruent with the marking criteria? And I think that's where we found it's often not. But as a pedagogical tool, the fact that it's getting students to review the output more carefully, so that's where we're thinking it's useful, actually not as a marker at all, because it can be rubbish, but more because students are more critically engaging with the feedback.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah, I mean, and this is where that bigger picture of where does it fit into a whole carefully designed teaching sequence, and at what point are you going to use it, why and when, and yeah, being able to document. I mean, I've had one where we've been able to use it in class to see how students were going, and I think in some ways it would be really helpful we need data that tells us how students may or may not use it, and we need access to that, and probably real-time access, a bit like kind of user experience type of data.